Welcome to the MindSpeaking podcast, where we talk about the human side of data. In other words, data, communication, and personal development. My name is Peter Akkies. I'm driven by curiosity, and my aim is to spread insights that you can apply in your life starting today. So, let's do it. Let's start MindSpeaking. Today on the MindSpeaking podcast, I speak with Peter Akkies. I met Peter a few years ago during one of the meetings of Toastmasters, a public speaking club. I'm really excited because back then, a few years ago at that meeting, I saw him on stage and I saw him speak. And immediately it was clear that he has an energetic way of speaking. And you also see that in this episode. Also, Peter kind of created a dream life for himself. He is an entrepreneur and takes a lot of holidays. He is the founder of peterakkies.net, where he talks about productivity in blogs and also creates a lot of YouTube videos next to his paid courses. So if you want to find out more about how to organize your life, how to create this dream life like Peter did, and to learn more about his story, and how you can create a life with less stress and get more done, whatever your goals are, then Peter has a lot of tips for you. You will enjoy this episode about personal development, how to get better at public speaking, and travel. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I certainly did. Enjoy. Hey, Peter.
Hey, Gilbert.
Nice
for
to see you
having me.
again. I'm so glad you joined on the podcast. Actually, we met during Toastmasters. One of the meetings there. We'll tell more about that later. It's a public speaking club. And I'm excited to talk to you about a lot of different topics. But first, of course, the audience would like to know a bit more about you. Would you like to tell a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. There's always the question of how much detail should I share. So I'll do a bullet point overview. So I'm Dutch. I live in the Netherlands now, just like you. I did spend quite a lot of time living abroad, sort of when I was 17. I moved to Hong Kong for the last 2 years of my high school. That was fun at a very international school. And I was like, hey, I like this living abroad thing. Then I went to study in the US. So I did my bachelor's degree in the US. For 4 years. And then, there's like, okay, now what do I have to do for work? A lot of people were going into consulting. That sounded exciting to me at the time. So I was like, oh, let's apply to some consulting firms. There's different kinds of firms. And the one that appealed to me the most is known as economic consulting or litigation consulting. So I went into that. And I did that for 3.5 years. It's the kind of work where basically what we did is large companies are suing each other and they're arguing over numbers. And we would run math, whether it's in an Excel spreadsheet or in like a statistical piece of software. We'd read a lot of documents, write up reports, and all this stuff had to happen fast and very accurately, because it was often, it was always at least about millions of dollars, tens of millions, 100 millions, sometimes more. And so the work that we had to do had to be very accurate, and we had to do it very fast. And sometimes it got quite busy. And after doing that for 3.5 years, I totally burned out. I didn't want to deal with that anymore. And then I moved back to the Netherlands, which is, as you can imagine, quite a big move, because at that time I'd been living in the US for 7 years. So I felt sort of more American than Dutch at this point. Moved back to the Netherlands and spent a couple years, basically recovering from burnout. And at some point I was like, I never want to have a job anymore. I don't want anybody else telling me what to do or when I have to do it by or whatever. And tried a bunch of business ideas. Some of them worked out, or rather one of them worked out. A bunch of them didn't. And the one that worked out was teaching people how to be more productive, in particular using certain apps. And so I've been doing that for a couple of years now. And it's a pretty fun life.
Good. I think there's so many interesting avenues we could take from here, right? But let's start with the following. I'm very curious about your burnout. This is a more interesting topic for me since 2 years ago when I started my own business, and I think more people can relate to that, whether you have your own business or not. And I'm wondering, what was the first time you thought maybe I'm overworked, or what were some symptoms you had?
It's actually really hard to say, it's hard to pinpoint one particular moment, because at the time I was much less aware of my feelings, of my emotions, and of my sort of, body state, both mind and body than I am now. So it's a realization that crept in over time. Looking back at it, there are a lot of warning signs. I was getting more irritated with people. really easily, right? I was unable to sort of juggle multiple projects at a time, which I still think most people try to do too much at once anyway, but that's sort of the nature of the job that I was in, where you're always working on different projects. You know, there's usually not one project that needs all of your time, so you get split. And I would get really sort of serious with people about like, do not enter my office, do not talk to me. I need to work, but like in a probably too aggressive way. So in hindsight, I realized all these things, but at the time I didn't. And I had very little free time. You know, I was not one of the people in the office that worked the most, by the way. I was probably one of the people in the office that worked the least, but even so, the hours were such that on some weeks, you know, you're always having dinner in the office. You're always going home really, really late, taking a taxi home that the company pays for. You know, there were days when I took a taxi back to work in the morning, whereas normally I would bike to the train station, then take a train. But there were days when like I just wanted to speed it up just so I could get another half hour of sleep. Yeah. And so that was not, wow. It was not, I mean, it was cool in a sense that when you're young, you know, at the time I was sort of in my early to mid 20s, you're like, oh, this is cool. I'm getting paid a lot of money to work for important people. And like people are driving me around in taxis and whatever. But like it didn't really feel fun. And there are plenty of evenings when I came home. I lived in San Francisco and worked in Silicon Valley at the time. And so I lived at the top of a hill. And so on the way home, I would take first a train for about 45 minutes and then like a half hour bike ride, but I had to bike up the hill. Some days I made it all the way up the hill, but usually I didn't. Either way, I'd be drenched in sweat. So the first thing I would do when I would come home at like whatever it is, 8 p.m. or something, maybe 7 if I was really lucky, was take a shower and then quickly eat something and whatever. And then I'd have like 2 hours left in my day before I'd have to start all over again. So that's the experience. And not many vacation days, especially, you know, we live in the Netherlands here where employers are a bit more generous with vacation days than in America. And so for American standards, it was all right. But in the end, I just didn't have enough time to myself, and the work pressure just got to me at some point, and it got to a point where I was like, I need to quit my work very soon because it's getting really bad.
All right. Well, good decision then. And I was wondering, did many of your colleagues back then, did they feel the same? Were they in the same rhythm?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people found it difficult, but it's not like everybody burned out, you know, like most people didn't. And I think there's some certain personality traits that make you more likely to burn out. For example, I'm quite perfectionist, or I'm less so now, but that's something that really contributed to it. When you have a lot of work on your plate for a lot of different projects and you want to do everything correctly, you want to do everything right, that can really be a problem because you're not doing things as fast as people want you to do them, or you're doing them as fast as you want people to do them, but you're doing sort of more work in that time than other people. So you're like really, really pushing yourself. And that's sort of a cycle that I got into where I got really stressed. Being stressed causes your brain not to function as well. So you either forget things or you make mistakes, and then you get mad at yourself and you try even harder. You generate even more stress. You make even more mistakes, and it's like a vicious circle.
Right. Yeah, it's a very interesting story, and I think there's so much to learn from that. You also mentioned living abroad, right? You mentioned Hong Kong, you mentioned the US. How do you think those periods outside of the Netherlands, living abroad, influence you as a person?
Yeah, well, first of all, I love living abroad. I totally want to live in the US again someday. The only thing is that my girlfriend's Turkish, so it doesn't have an American passport. I don't want a job anymore, ever. So you quickly run out of viable visa pathways. So, no, I mean, I loved it. I really feel, and this has been really relevant during COVID. During COVID, I did much less traveling than I usually did. And it really feels like your brain just shrinks. Like you're not your brain, but like you're sort of the part of the world that you are aware of what is going on is like getting smaller and smaller. And I felt by living abroad, it was the opposite way around, where you see things from a different perspective. You meet people with very different ideas. You know, like anywhere, Dutch people have a certain culture, certain, you know, ways that they do things, certain things that they say, and you start to think that's normal. That's the only way that things happen. But then you go to other places and things are different. So I really found it super valuable because of that. I think I became a much more resilient person. Also, just because you're faced with different challenges that you may not have in wherever you grew up. Yeah. So, I mean, I, you know, if I ever have kids, I want to make sure that they travel lots as well, I guess is one way to put it.
Awesome, awesome. And you mentioned a few things that you've learned along the way that makes me curious about what type of person was Peter Akkies in high school.
Yeah, well, it depends whether we're talking about, Dutch high school, which I did for 5 years, or the 2 years afterwards that I did in Hong Kong, because those are quite different. In Dutch high school, I spent most of my time playing video games. I mean, it's hard. I've tried to put a number to it. I think sort of 6 to 8 hours, maybe sometimes 10 hours a day is like a reasonable estimate of how much time I was playing video games.
Wow.
That was a big part of my life at the time.
What did you like so much about it, video games, by the way?
I think, well, first of all, there's just like action, dopamine, excitement, all the classic things why video games are fun. But I also did it sort of in a team context. And so at the time I played Call of Duty and actually that sort of my team reached the #1 spot in Europe in Call of Duty for a short period of time, which at the time, this was quite a while ago, almost 20 years ago. And it was much easier then to become like the best Call of Duty player in Europe than it is now. Like right now, that's much, much, much harder. Right now, there's like professional tournaments of people earning millions of bucks and whatever. But I think part of the excitement was just, hey, we have a team going on here. It's a social thing. I was sort of the leader of the team, sometimes together with one other person. And so you're making decisions for people. I really approached it basically as a sport. Like we had trainings, we had competitive matches. I was doing a lot of research all the time. Oh yeah, we would train.
Trainings even.
In a very detailed way. We're like, okay, like you have this map and you're fighting each other 5 versus 5 usually, right? It's called a war, by the way. It's very funny. And then, you start at the map at a specific time. And where we would map out, okay, we start here. In how many seconds can we reach this part of the map, which is a strategic location, a house to occupy, or a vehicle to grab, or whatever, somewhere to put a mine, so that when the other guys come, they run onto the mine. And so we would time out if we run this way or that way, like what's faster. Okay, you should be there after 19 seconds. Like if you're there after 19 seconds, I'm here after 17 seconds, we can ambush them. Like I took this very seriously. So.
Yeah, I can tell. And maybe there's something in there also about, improving all the time and trying to, I don't know, not game the system, but improve your own game, and I know you're also very much into personal development. Do you also see that link, and how did the personal development journey start for you?
Sort of as a teenager, maybe not thinking of it in terms of, the phrase personal development, but I've always been super interested in like improving myself. And so it was, I guess at the time, very fun to always think, how can I become better at this? Oh, I lose. It's painful. I don't like losing. What did I do wrong? What do I need to do better? And I think over time, you sort of apply that to different parts of your life. For example, in college in the US, one of the things I did is I worked in the so-called writing center. So we had a writing center where people would go in and they would bring their papers or a paper that they'd written, and people working there, which was me at some point, would review the paper and come up with some feedback. And then you sit down together with the student, maybe for 10 minutes to 40 minutes, and be like, okay, here are some ideas for how you might improve the structure, how you might improve, the words that you're using, et cetera, et cetera. And thinking about it, that again was a big exercise in just like taking one specific skill and very deliberately getting better at it. First, there was a class to teach you how to like give feedback to people, basically. So like you're learning how to give feedback. Then, a lot of, practice, a lot of experience also comes into it, of course, and discussing with other people what makes for a good academic paper, et cetera. What are some good structures? And, when I think about it, I can pinpoint basically at any time of my life, I was busy actively trying to improve something.
Right. And what about public speaking?
Yeah.
Because we met at Toastmasters, which is a public speaking club. I know you're a big fan of public speaking. You enjoy it. You have a podcast channel or a YouTube channel. You have your own podcast. I can tell from this conversation alone that you enjoy speaking, right? And if I think about you and the speaker, Peter Akkies, I think about an energetic, spontaneous, and funny speaker. Have you always been like that, or how has that been developed?
I know even in Dutch high school, sort of before I left for Hong Kong, which at the time was pretty interesting, right? 16-year-old who's about to turn 17 is going to spend 2 years in Hong Kong. This was in 2006 when I guess it was even more interesting than it is now, because at the time there was no WhatsApp, so like you could like text people. Like I would go on Skype sort of with my parents once a week, and that was like very advanced technology. And so I remember giving a speech at my high school before leaving, and everybody was just blown away by how good the speech was, I guess, for like a 16-year-old. Whereas me, I just felt like I was just kind of telling my story. Like, why did I choose to do this? What am I going to do and stuff? And yeah, I guess at that time, people already perceived me as sort of a very energetic speaker. And I don't know, maybe that's just kind of the person that I am. I feel like you probably have some thoughts on this, but if you're speaking and you're putting on a very different persona than you have in your daily life, I think you're just making it harder for yourself.
Absolutely. I think the number one thing you need to do in becoming a better speaker is being yourself, right? Being authentic, because people can feel it, people can see it. And yeah, that's why I think it's so important. Still, I think always people have things to improve, right? If I look at myself, I think I'm an okay speaker, but sometimes my energy levels go a bit down if I'm speaking for longer, or if I need to think about the content a lot. So in that sense, I can learn a lot from speakers like you who are a bit more energetic by nature. Do you have any tips you could share for me, very actually, or for anyone in the audience who would like to become a bit more energetic or a bit of a better speaker?
Yeah, so for me, I have to be excited about something. So by the way, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I feel like my problem is kind of the opposite. I feel like sometimes my energy level is too high and people are like, you got to slow down, man. You got to slow down. But I just naturally get excited about stuff. And when I'm excited about something, the energy level will show. Like, I'm not faking it, you know? And if I had to talk about something that was really boring, like a really dry subject, then I would have to have something else that is exciting about it to like have that energy level. So if it's not the subject matter that excites me so much, maybe I'm trying a new presentation technique, or maybe I'm playing around with the inflections of my voice, right? Or maybe I'm trying to get a certain reaction out of the audience at a certain point. Like, I'm really focused on delivering a certain joke or something like that. And so I need to have something that is like, either haven't done it before, or I've done it before, but it didn't go well. A bit of a challenge that keeps it interesting. I feel like then the energy is there. If it's just boring, I'm just trying to get through it, whatever. Yeah, I'm going to be, it's going to be a really dry delivery.
Right. Is that also something you try to apply in your YouTube videos? Because you create a bunch of YouTube videos. Do you always try to experiment with the format or try to focus on something different while speaking?
I'm really in an exploratory phase with my YouTube channel. On YouTube specifically, I've made videos for a few years now that are very how-to screencast style videos, like tutorials. I will teach you how to do this in this app. Those are very easy for me to do now because it's mostly improvisation. I have a bullet points in my head, like 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever things I want to mention. If it's more than that, I'll just put sort of my iPad next to me and kind of glance at it every now and then. But it's kind of a bit boring to always do the same kind of video, and sometimes that's why I am experimenting with different kinds of videos. And sometimes the experiment is a success, sometimes it's not. I like to think that is all part of the journey. We have to accept that some things are going to work and some things are not. In fact, if you're not making enough, sort of things that don't work out, maybe you should sort of expand your boundaries a little bit, try more things. I don't always try something new, because sometimes I'm just, maybe I'm feeling a little stressed. I don't have that much time. It's been a little while since I put out a video. I have an idea for a video that I think is going to go well. I don't really have the energy to do something creative with it. I'm just kind of, trying to get it out there. I do notice that those videos often to me seem worse than people sort of perceive them. Like, to me, it's really obvious, like, oh my God, I hated this, blah, blah. But people can sometimes tell, but not always. So sometimes people are like, this was great. And I'm like, it was not great recording. Like, recording this completely sucked. So, other times I think it's visible. Other times I think I make something and you can kind of tell that I'm not having a fun time. And I've been really doing my best lately to avoid that, because I want people to watch my videos and feel inspired and not be like, wow, this guy looks like he's not getting enough sleep, or this guy looks like he's super stressed. Why would I listen to this one?
All right. Yeah, lately, a few weeks ago, I listened to Tim Ferriss, and he said that he made a big change at some point in his entrepreneurial career, where he started to make decisions based on how do I feel when I see it on my calendar? If I see a new podcast or a new project or a new type of activity, how do I feel? Do I feel stressed? Do I feel energy drained? I think that's a good way to, organize your week, if you have that luxury, of course. So I think you could, I can imagine you could kind of do the same with YouTube videos and make it interesting and find an interesting subject to talk about.
It's interesting because, first of all, like you're saying, that's a luxury position to be in. At the same time, you can create that luxury position for yourself. Not everybody can, but probably most people listening to this podcast can. There are definitely plenty of people in the world born into a certain situation where it's much harder for them to sort of make that happen. But, if you're listening to this podcast, very good chance that you're able to sort of create that luxury position for yourself. May take a couple of years. It took me several years of not working, recovering from burnout, and then several years of trying to start several businesses, some of which failed and one of which succeeded. And even then in the beginning, the income wasn't that high. It's quite good now, but that took a while. Anyway, what I was going to say is I agree with Tim Ferriss in that you generally want to be excited about things on your calendar. There are probably exceptions, like at some point you need to take care of your accounting. You may never get excited about your accounting, but you're going to have to do it anyway if you sort of run a business. But I think a lot of the times people kid themselves about what is fun and what is not. I think a lot of the time people are trying to they feel like something should be fun for them, or it should be interesting, or they should be excited about it, but they're not. And they're not listening to how they actually feel about this. It's like, no, but like recording a podcast should be exciting, but then if you really dread it, like just don't do it. Like it's fine. There's something else out there for you. And I really tried to sort of take my gut feeling seriously more and more, where if something, let's say all my competitors, everybody else on YouTube in this, in the same niche, making the same kinds of videos are doing one thing, but if I then try to create videos like that and it really stresses me out and I have a terrible time, more and more I'm able to tell myself, this is fine. It's not for me. Like I know it would work if I could make myself do it, but I don't want to do it. So I'm not going to. So.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're totally right. You can create this life, this luxury position, right? Because right now you are in that position. You kind of decide what you enjoy, what values you have, who you want to work with. And many people are in a job they might like or might not like. But of course I'm curious, and I'm sure the listeners are as well, how you got there, right? Because there has been a long journey. You also, at some point you did a content creation challenge. Maybe you want to expand on that, or how did you get here, right? Because we haven't spoken so much yet about the professional side. And I think many people want to become an entrepreneur. So maybe you can guide us or say how it was for you.
People tend to ask if, when I tell, you introduce yourself at a party or whatever, and people are like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I make video courses online. Oh, really? What about? Oh, yeah, productivity. Oh, really? That's so cool. Wait, how do you do that? Do you do that like on your own? Like, yeah. And so how do you get started? And it's not like I had this idea all of a sudden, as soon as I quit my job or even before I quit my job. It's not like I had this idea and I just ran with it. There was a whole confusing process to begin with. But it really, like, one of the things I've learned is like business is not so hard. People have problems and they want you to solve their problems. And if you can solve their problems, they will pay you for that. It's really not that hard. Like, it's like that. And you can make it a lot more complicated. And I definitely made it a lot more complicated. So it took me several years. And at first, this was when I was still sort of in the middle of burnout recovery. I'm not even sure if I realized that I had burnout yet. Like I knew something was wrong with me, but I don't think I really applied that label for like maybe a year and a half after I quit my work. So it took quite a while. It wasn't really until I started working with a therapist, by the way, that like things really started improving quite rapidly. But it was sort of around that time where I was like, hey, people are making money on the internet. People are making things on the internet and like selling them to randos. And they're making a living that way. This sounds great. You can work from home. You can work from Bali. You can go wherever the hell you want with your laptop. I did go to Bali, by the way, a couple times in the past couple of years. And always enjoyable to like do a little bit of work there while, in some nice villa with a pool and whatever, doing some yoga, and that lifestyle really appealed to me. So I was like, how can I make this work? And then now you're at the point where, okay, I have a lifestyle in mind that I want to create for myself, but you still need a business. So that means you still need to solve some problems for people that like are valuable for them that they'll pay for. Right. And so you got to look for an opportunity. And I did so much mental work way too much mental work. I was consuming all the podcasts, all the books, all the online courses by other people teaching how to do online business. And at some point I felt like I could have been like an online business strategy consultant before I ever like made a single sale myself, just because of all the information that I put in my brain. But, information doesn't create a business. You have to take action. And it wasn't until I actually started taking some action that things took off.
It's inspiring to hear your story, and I can totally relate to what you're saying about taking action. And for me as well, I've taken notes and binged YouTube and articles for years before I actually started taking action. And I think no one can ever see the path in front of them, right? You first need to take action, and on the way, with a lot of scrambles, you get up and finally make it work. And by now, you're kind of a teacher, right, in a specific field. And they also say that teaching is the best way to learn. Do you agree with that? And if yes, does that mean that everyone needs to teach?
I don't know if it's the best way to learn. It's definitely a great way to learn. So for me, the thing specifically that I've been teaching started out with like how to use one specific app called OmniFocus, which is the task management app, a to-do app, a pretty complicated one. Let's say complex, because not complicated in a bad way, complex in a good way. And by teaching people how to use this app, people were able to organize their lives more and to get more stuff done. So get more organized, be more productive. That's valuable to people. And so they were willing to pay for this. And I first wrote a blog post on this topic. Then I kind of did nothing with that for 6 months. And 6 months later, I realized, hey, wait a second. Like, Google has picked this up. And it's like sending people to my website, where I've been doing a lot of blogging about a lot of random topics, and nobody was reading anything except for this one post that apparently was useful. Like how I use this app, and I put screenshots, and I, put arrows on the screenshots. Look, you should do this and whatever. And then someone was like, hey, you should really charge for this. And then I was like, you know what? Let's make an online course about it. And I think the first iteration of my course was quite good. I've never done a second iteration. I have added sort of lessons to it over time, and I've re-recorded a few lessons, but it's pretty much still the first iteration that I did. And it's really that process of creating a course, teaching people how to use this app from scratch that, allowed me to master the app. Because if you're going to teach something, like at least I'm the kind of person who always wants to do a good job. I want to do a thorough job. I started looking at some other content that was out there. Someone had written a book about this app. Someone else had done a course on this app. So I looked at their table of contents. It's like, oh yeah, that's great. I should probably cover those kind of topics. I looked at their content, and I was like, I don't think they're doing such a good job explaining this. Can I explain it better? And over time you learn to get much better at it. And that process has continued, as I've also been teaching for a couple of years now, a competitor app, a different app with the same purpose, called Things 3, and sort of related things around it, like the topics like goal setting or time management. The more you help other people with these problems, the more you find yourself thinking about them and coming up with interesting ways to solve issues in those areas.
Great. Yeah, I'm also taking one of your courses right now. I'm halfway, and it's really good. It's helping me a lot to structure all the tasks in my mind. I remember when I published my book, the months before were so messy. I was still working in a corporate job as well, and next to me was a big whiteboard with a lot of Post-its, and the Post-its number of Post-its only grew, right? And it was not very structured anymore, and sometimes they fell down because the glue was not strong enough, and it was all a mess because the order was not right. And I felt very stressed because of that. So thanks to the Things 3 app and your course, my life is much more structured. And the thing is, I'm very focused on productivity, and sometimes my girlfriend makes jokes about it, because I can be quite obsessed. I need to write things down. Things need to go out of my head. Some people also say there's a hustle culture or toxic productivity in the world. That many people try to force productivity on you or try to spread productivity while it's burning people out. At the other hand, it can also, help people, right? Avoid burnout. What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on toxic productivity?
Yeah, I mean, productivity is such a broad phrase that I don't really know what you mean by that, So in one of my courses, the first thing that I do is like, let's talk about what productivity actually means. Like, what does that mean for you? And I make people do an exercise to like write it down. Like if you look at the past month and you're like, that was a productive month. What does that mean? Or if you're like looking at your past year and you're like, this felt like a very unproductive year. Okay, why? Like, how are you measuring this? What are the metrics? And so, you can make it as toxic as you want, but it really doesn't need to be. I think of productivity as, are you making consistent progress on your goals? So it requires having goals. It requires making progress towards your goals, which requires taking action. So you can't be productive just by sitting around forever. You can certainly, so productivity doesn't mean always being in motion, right? If you're making consistent progress on your goals, that doesn't mean you need to do something active work-wise every day. Like at some point, maybe the most productive thing for you to do is go on a vacation. Because maybe if you go on a vacation, you're going to relax, you're going to get great ideas, and at the end of the year, you'll have sort of achieved more of your goals, or you're closer to achieving your goals than you were before. So, there are definitely people who think of productivity as, how many widgets can I crank per day? How many tasks can I check off in my task manager or in my paper planner or whatever you're using? That has no relation. Like why would you care? I always think about it I think of first principles. What's the goal of life? Oh, for me, the goal of life is to be happy. Okay, how am I going to be happy? I realized that pursuing goals makes me happy. Having goals and then trying to achieve them, that makes me happy. So if I'm doing a good job of that, I'm calling it productivity. So it's that simple.
Right. I wanted to ask you what, if you look at the last year, or when it was a productive year, what would make it productive? But I think you answered that question. So, and phrasing it that way, it sounds very simple, right? You managed to make life, break it down in very simple terms, but actually I don't think it's more complicated. I think we all tend to complicate it. As long as you know what's important for you, right? I know if you go to your website, almost the first thing you bump into is your values, what you care about. I think it's very strong because it shows, what you care about, what you focus on life. When did those values shape, or when did you decide that those values were important? Or talk us to us.
Yeah, I mean, over time, I did this exercise, I guess, at some point last year, maybe the year before. I forget exactly. COVID, so it's best with my sense of time, man. I don't remember when anything is, because there's no anchoring points. Every day is the same. For memory, I mean, but I always like to think of I call this a chain of why. So if you are doing something in the moment, why are you doing it? Well, you're doing it because you want to get some benefit. Either it's fun, or it's setting you up for future fun, or like it's keeping your body healthy, or you have some kind of goal of like, oh, I would like to build a life that's like that, and this moves me closer to that. So, you do things, and you do it because you have goals and you want to achieve those goals. Why do you have those goals? Why do those things matter for you? Then you quickly arrive at the level of values. And, you can put in some intermediate layers, like you can say, well, I have a vision for my life, and sort of, it doesn't really matter. When you think about it, why is a certain goal important to you? So let's say you have a goal, and that is, I want to make a certain amount of money. I want to have €1 million in the bank. Okay, great. But why is that your goal? So for me, I don't know if €1 million is my number, but let's say it's my number. I want that because that gives me financial freedom. That allows me to live my life in the way that I want to without needing to do things for other people, right? Without having to have a job that I don't want to show up to, or even run a business if it becomes stressful. And it's because I value autonomy. Autonomy is one of my core values. I like to be in charge of my own life. I don't want someone else telling me what to do. And it's really nice because that means that sometimes when I'm editing a YouTube video or whatever, doing something that maybe isn't super fun, I can at least tell myself, well, the reason I'm doing this is because if I do this, it's going to be marketing for my business. That means I'm going to generate more revenue. That means I'm going to get closer to being financially independent. And that helps me spend my life the way that I want to and be free. And so when you think about it that way, things become quite simple. I think the hard part is actually figuring out what are your values, what are your goals, and what are the action steps that you need to take to make your goals come true so that you can live out your values.
Right. What has been the role of journaling in that process, in figuring out what your goals are and what you find important?
I journal a good amount. I used to journal on paper, by the way, but I found myself, it's very fun to read back things that I wrote in my paper journals over the years, but I found myself not actually journaling that much on paper because it takes much longer to write on paper. So these days I journal digitally, and that makes me do it often. It's not as fun to read my digital journal entries from, say, a year ago, but, there are more of them. So I think that compensates for it. I find journaling very helpful, and it's guaranteed time that you're taking out for yourself. When you're journaling, you're taking out time for yourself, for your thoughts, for your feelings, which is something that I don't do as much otherwise. I'm actually very grateful to this whole period that I burned out when I was working with a therapist, like I was mentioning earlier, and recovering, because I really spent years learning how to identify sort of, hey, what am I feeling? What emotions are going on? And I got into mindfulness meditation, which I do daily, just 15, 20 minutes a day, really not that much. But hey, that's time that you're taking out to pay attention to how you're feeling, what's going on in your mind, what's going on in your body. And journaling is just a different way of doing that. And I find journaling essential for setting goals, for example. So if I'm setting goals, which I do on a quarterly basis, or at least I update my list of goals on a quarterly basis, I ask myself, hey, I have this list here of things that I said I want, meaning my goals. Are these still my goals? Are these still the things that I want? If not, why not? If I'm like, yeah, this is still something that's important to me, I write down why. Why is this important to me? And journaling for me is an essential way of doing that, because if you do this all in your head, it's very easy to skip steps. Whereas if you force yourself to write it down, you cannot skip steps. You're like writing it down. This is important to me because you have to fill in the because. Like, it looks weird if there's no because. It's so to me, it's kind of a discipline tool to make sure that you're thinking about your goals, or if it's like your emotions or whatever, is more disciplined. Writing it out, helps you be more precise.
Right. Nice to hear your perspective about that. I think you use the Day One app, right? Right. Yeah, I use the same app, and it's really funny reading back your own thoughts, and maybe not like a written notebook, but still it's really funny because your thoughts can change a lot in the way you see things. And recently I printed like 5 years of digital journaling into a physical book. It's a good one to have. Yeah, it's right here. Right now I would like to switch gears and go to a rapid fire round with some quick questions, and then we're almost nearing the end. The first question, we talked about travel quite a bit, is what's your favorite place to travel?
I think I'm going to say Bali for now. Do you want to know why?
All right.
It's because there's very good scuba diving there, and I love to go scuba diving. It's because people are generally very friendly there. I'm vegan. There's a lot of vegan food in Bali. It's a very vegan-friendly place. It's the kind of weather that I like. Hot. And it's just it's a very relaxing place. Some parts of it are very touristy, other parts not so much. And there are many other places in the world that I like, but this is an excellent combination.
Right. What do you like so much about scuba diving?
Yeah, no, and actually I'm going again in a few weeks to Mexico for some 3-week scuba diving, so that'll be really fun. I like it because it is first of all, it's a skill that you need to learn. You cannot just jump in the water and start doing it. It's like a technical thing. It's very analog, right? You're not taking your phone underwater. It's a very social thing. So you are often in a boat with fellow divers or driving somewhere, but anyway, diving with other people. You see stuff underwater. That's a whole different thing. But then you talk about it afterwards. Hey, what did you see? What did you see? Oh, I saw this kind of fish. What kind of fish was it? Well, I think it was this one. Well, why don't we grab this book and see if it was in fact that one or a different one? And I love that stuff. It's really fun to learn about what happens under the sea. You don't normally see it. And then you go dive. And if you go dive in a good place, you're like, holy crap, there's a whole world out here that most people have no idea exists.
Awesome. And what is the number one place, thing, or person you go to for learning?
Place, thing, or person? I guess I'm going to give a shout out to a person. If I'm sort of thinking of the past years of my life, I feel like the person I've learned the most from is a guy called Steve Pablina. Big fan of his. He's had a personal development blog for a long time. I guess attracts like millions of readers. I'm a member of a community that he runs, and I found many of his writings exceedingly valuable. I actually did a speech on him once at our Toastmasters club. Yeah.
Oh, really?
And so, there are many people I've learned from, but he's sort of the person that I feel I learned the most from because he's very good at articulating personal development principles that are sort of universally true, but articulating it in a way that they're very easy to apply.
Awesome. And what's one thing that surprises people about you?
I think a lot of people are surprised by my level of English, which is very funny because once people figure out that I'm Dutch, they're like, you don't sound Dutch. You should have a Dutch accent. And I'm like, well.
Yeah, that was the same for me the first time we met, because Toastmasters is an international club. And I think we started speaking in English. And after some time, I realized you were not Dutch. And it was a surprise to me as well.
Wait, no, I am Dutch. Yeah, and so, obviously I lived in the US for 7 years. Before that, in international school in Hong Kong for 2 years. And before that, I did half my sort of classes in high school in the Netherlands in English as well, So altogether, that adds up to a lot of practice.
Right, yeah. And I couldn't tell that you were born here. So what are some of the best decisions that you've made in your life?
I do think of my decision to quit my job and take what ended up being years for self-care. That was an excellent decision, even though I had to leave the United States for it, where I really enjoyed living. Just spending a few years mostly taking care of my mind, taking care of my body, learning how to feel my feelings, which sounds silly, but a lot of people aren't very good at. I certainly was very bad at it before. Understand what I'm feeling, and take the time to figure out, what do I actually want from life? Like, what is important to me? What are my goals? Like, in what lifestyle makes me the happiest, and experimenting with that. I find it invaluable because it put me in a position now where I'm really enjoying my day to day, whereas there are plenty of people in the world who don't enjoy their day to day, who have a job that they find shit, or, are in a relationship that's not working. And, I think there was an enormous payoff to even taking years to do that.
Wonderful. The last question of this rapid fire round is, what job would you be terrible at?
Oh, watch repair person. There might be a more elegant way of saying this. I don't know if there's a word for that. That probably is a fancy word for that. My fine motor skills are just not good. I'm just bad at this. And so I would be getting frustrated with all the gears and whatever. I also tend to get very sweaty hands when I get stressed, and I feel like then things start slipping out of your hands. So I think I would if we want to up the stakes a little bit, it'd be like brain surgeon. You don't want me poking around in your brain. Bad one.
Brain surgeon. I will trust you with a lot of things, including productivity, yes, but not brain surgery. All right, so we're nearing the end, and I would like to talk a bit about your company, peterakkies.net, and what you're offering there, what you're working on at the moment. Share us a bit about that. And as mentioned, I'm taking your course of Things 3. I didn't know Things 3 until I met Peter and saw his blogs.
Yeah, that's great. No, thank you for the kind words. So essentially, my company, I just help people get organized and be more productive. And I do this in a variety of ways. And the main way that I've been doing that recently is by publishing lots of YouTube videos. But I've also had a weekly newsletter for years, and I've written a lot of articles over the years also. And so on YouTube is where I try to teach a lot of the principles, and then if people want to go deeper, they can enroll in one of my courses. But lately, I've been putting a lot of effort into making sort of better YouTube videos and trying to both do some of those how-to, hey, here's an app that can help a lot of people, here's how it works kind of videos, as well as more general productivity principles videos. Although it's sometimes a challenge to make the more general principles videos engaging enough for people to actually watch.
Right, but I'm sure if you include the storytelling like you've done in this podcast episode, and like you can, I've seen you do many times, I'm sure that will lead to some interesting and good YouTube videos. So what is one takeaway you want people to take away from this episode?
Honestly, the main thing that I want to encourage people to do is be super honest with themselves about what they like and what they don't like. I see all the time, I see people living lives that they're not happy with. Hey, if you're not happy with something, drop it. It could be a relationship, it could be a job, a business, or whatever, a side hustle, or a hobby. If it's not making you happy most of the time, just stop it, accept that, and do something else. There's no should in being happy. There are plenty of things that are going to make you happy. So don't spend your time on stuff that doesn't, and spend your time on something else. If you need to take some time to figure out what makes you happy, take that time.
Great message. So last question is, where can people connect with you, follow you? Of course, you have your website, peterakkies.net, your YouTube channel. Is anything else?
Those places are great. My website, peterakkies.net. That's Peter and then Akkies, but I'm sure you'll put this in the show notes. And on YouTube, you can find me. Just search Peter Akkies and you'll find my videos.
Well, great. Thanks a lot, Peter. I really enjoyed the conversation about productivity, about personal development, about international experience. I think very diverse, and I really want to underline the last message. If you're not happy, try to see what you can change and become more self-aware. And I think we've discussed a lot of tools, how you can become that. And I think your story is an example how you can do that. So thanks a lot for today. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, Gilbert, for having me on.
Do you want people to listen to your data and increase your business impact? Then take my free email course or do the quick self-test of your data communication skills. Go to mindspeaking.com and start learning today.